This podcast is brought to you by HemHealer. Use promo code HemFit at hemhealer.com on your first purchase to receive 10% off your first order.
Welcome to the HemFit podcast. I'm your host, Ian Gutowski. This podcast always brought to you. Oh, thank you. This podcast always brought to you by HemHealer. It is a capsule you take orally to get rid of those hemorrhoids. They can be awful. They can be unbearable to get through. I know I lived through them for 15 years. This is the thing that did it for me. There's going to be a link somewhere down in the bio, or you can simply go to hemhealer.com. That being said, it's time to introduce our guest today. And, we've known each other over a year now. My friend Dion. Everybody, Dion, how are you today?
Doing good. Doing very, very good.
So glad to have you on, a true philanthropist. But the word, even the philanthropist, does that mean, like, whenever you hear philanthropist, you always think of like some guy that's like Batman or something? You know what I mean? It's like some guy that's got $78 billion, and now he's like, and now I will give back. But we were talking earlier where you definitely, your business is all philanthropy work, right? It's event planning for people that are trying to feed the hungry. If you're trying to
There's
cancer
about 12
research,
different causes that we can focus some attention around. But I think more than anything, what we try to do is find out what people care about and to really kind of bring forward an opportunity to have them to really have an impact on that cause at a local level so that they can physically see the change happening in their own community. And the second thing that we really try to do is get sustainable volunteerism. And what I mean by that is to have an event that really kind of touches the heart and the mind, right, in a way that makes people want to come back and do more and makes people want to contribute ideas as to alternative ways that we might be able to approach attacking that cause. You know, hunger is near and dear to my heart. And it's been really kind of the focal point for how we began the company. We started a organization called Tango Charities today. And Tango Charities is specifically focused on eliminating hunger. And quite honestly, the story was very humble. Started in a small coffee shop with just a handful of people, maybe 25 to 30 people or so. And my partner, his name's Nick Marino, he gave a little bit of insight into what hunger actually looks like. That roughly, 78% of the people that go hungry every single day actually have a job. They go to work, they go to school, and they live amongst us. And we call them the hungry invisible. The other roughly 18 to 20% of people that are hungry are the ones that we visibly see. Those are the ones that are homeless, right? But who we're trying to impact is all of those groups. And we try to bring more awareness to the fact that there are people that we work with a lot of times that, are suffering with this, but they just don't tell you that they're suffering with hunger, right? There's a lot of people that, sometimes say, why'd my lunch get stolen out of the employee break room? Or why won't this guy ever go with us to lunch? Or why do they disappear around lunchtime, right? Yeah. And it's because people are trying to maintain that dignity. And there are several things. I've been working in the financial services industry for quite a long time, a little bit close to over 20 years at this point. But
that's your start, right?
Yeah, that was my start. Right,
because you're talking right out of college, you went right into. And are you Floridian?
I am not. I was born in North Carolina. And
North Kakalaki.
That's right, North Kakalaki. Born in North Carolina. I went to North Carolina A&T State University, which is an HBCU in North Carolina. Went there for architectural engineering. And
you want to build buildings or draw buildings?
I did not. If you would have asked me at the time that I was going, if you would have asked me what I wanted to do when I was going to college, I wanted to be a graphic designer.
Okay.
And I wanted to be a fireman because I figured I could fight fires while I did graphic design, right?
Because when you're not fighting fighters, right, you're coming up with logos.
Exactly. That's exactly what I wanted to do. But my aunt, who was very insistent that I not waste my time on graphic design because I would never make any money at it, insisted that I use my math skills and my science skills and go into architectural engineering. So
is that what your skill set was? You're real good at math, and you're
real good at math, real good at science. but my heart was in art. Like I love design. That was really what I wanted to do. I was very much creative. I trained myself to be good at math and science. My sister is way better at it than I am. She's way, way better at it. And so I trained myself on it, but art was really what I wanted to do. And ultimately I ended up going to school for architecture and engineering. And literally my third year in college, I got a phone call from her where she said, hey, your uncle and I bought a graphic design company. Would you like to come and do an internship with us? And I was like, yeah, but you told me I could never make any money out of it, right?
And then they open up a business. Like how
they open up an entire business after, you know, and she was very successful, you know, even before that, you know, her and her husband were. And so that's why I listened to them, because, you know, I saw two entrepreneurs that have been very successful for themselves, and you know, I was just following their guidance, right? But I was a little upset about it, to be quite honest with you. And I just went on a little bit of a mental spiral, decided I wanted to kind of take some time and figure out what it is that I really wanted to do. Because at that point, I was so deep into it. I got to finish at this point, you know? But I got out of school and I wanted to take a break, and I went to work for Citigroup. I had been director of sales for a hotel that was right down the street from the office. And these guys from Citigroup, their executives were coming down from Chicago, and they were like, you're taking care of us, so we want to make sure we take care of you at some point. And so I went over, dropped their names, and immediately got a job working there. And I was so bored. I was extremely bored when I first started working there. And so I started problem solving. And I started problem solving for a lot of inefficiencies that were happening in the business itself. And they started giving me all these different promotions. And the thing was is that financial literacy was not something that I had in my hometown, not a lot of. I was very fortunate to experience someone who actually taught junior achievement for my school. And so that was my first kind of, you know, introduction into financial literacy. But when I got to Citigroup and I started seeing some of the same patterns of people that kind of had my background, or, you know, very humble, that didn't have access to credit, or didn't have access to banking, or didn't understand how to use it, I became I started trying to solve that problem quite a bit, right? And so because I was trying to solve that problem in a very unique way and trying to use the infrastructure that was already there, again, the engineering background helped me quite a bit, because I was always reimagining, rethinking what we were currently doing and changing that to better benefit a broader audience, right? Yeah. And in Citigroup is great because you can play around with different cohorts of customer segments, and you can mess it up, and it doesn't really make that big of a difference, because 2/3 of the world's economy runs through those banks. So, you know, you can mess up a little bit in a small cohort of folks, and they allow you to kind of experiment and play around. And I was really excited about that, because they gave me a lot of opportunities to kind of test things and try different things out and whatnot. And so I had gotten to a point where I was like really excited about the work that I was doing. Yeah. And I got a really unique opportunity to work for the founder of Black Entertainment Television, Robert L. Johnson, which we were talking about a little bit earlier. He was going to start a bank in Orlando, Florida, and he wanted that bank to have a credit card product, but he wanted them to be a national issuer of the credit card product. And his plight was very much the same as mine. Give access to credit to people who typically don't have access to credit, right? Yeah. Find a way to model the product in a way that not only gives them access, but also teaches them the way to actually use it the right way, right? It was a very interesting kind of business case, and I loved it. And I got there, and I left. Think about it. I was in Citigroup, which has tons of infrastructure, huge around the world. And I had all the tools and access of things that I needed to kind of play around with different things. And I got to, at the time it was called Urban Trust Bank, it's now Axiom Bank. I got there and they said, you are the credit card team. You're just it. You. Just me. Boom. And I was like, cool, let's do it. Like let's figure out some cards, man. Let's get some people some credit. Let's figure this out. And it was a very, very different environment, because I equate it to, and the example that I use for folks all the time is, when I worked for Citigroup, it was very much like being in one of the armed forces, right? Which I have lots of respect for the military. When you go into the military, they teach you all these like cool things, how to fight, combat, and they teach you about artillery. They teach you about strategy. They teach you about, planning for wars, and they teach you all these logistics.
Discipline,
right? Discipline, right?
More,
Tons of stuff, and they give you all the resources in the world. And even if you do have to go to war, you go to war with all this infrastructure and the best opportunity for you to be successful, right?
Mm-hmm.
You take all that training and you drop them off in East LA somewhere, and all of that training kind of goes to naught, right? Because like you got nothing out there. LA. You're just in East LA and you're by yourself, and you got a lot of knowledge, but you got no resources. You got no plan. You don't know what to do, right? And that's very much like what it's like to go from corporate America into small business. And going in there, I still had the same focus. I still had the same kind of motivation for trying to problem solve. But I had to do it with very different tools, and I had to build those tools out. The cool part about working for Mr. Johnson is that he has the capital in order to kind of give me those resources, and he opens up a lot of doors. So it was fun. And I can tell you that within the first 1 to 2 years of working for him, I probably learned way more than I did ever at Citigroup working for them for 10 years, because when you have to build the product yourself, it's a very different world for you. So I went on, obviously, to kind of continue down that plight of providing access to capital for people who typically don't get it, right? There's over 2/3 of the United States that don't qualify for traditional credit, because most banks will stop, issuing credit if your FICO score is at 720 or less, which is pretty high.
That's
and most
720.
People
so 720 is pretty high. Like I've got
is.
decent credit coming off of bad credit, and it's taken me 4 years, and I'm right around that number, and it's been a lot to get here.
Yeah, it is. It's very difficult. And the credit industry doesn't normally give you much of an opportunity to kind of change that. I think a lot of the algorithms that they use in order to assess credit are changing now, because they're incorporating non-traditional things like your bank data. They actually look at your checking account now to see how you're transacting. They look at your direct deposits, things of that nature, and they're incorporating that into their scores. They're using non-traditional data like your rent and utilities and things of that nature, right? Mm-hmm. So all of those things getting incorporated. I think the algorithms are going to get better, and it's going to start to give a little bit more access, but I think the jury is still out on how much that's going to open it up, right?
So when you were there, that obviously seemed like that was the seed for you to get into philanthropy, and seeing like
totally was.
You could see impact, right?
Yeah.
You could see impact right there. So what was the impact that you saw building out credit, and especially being like on the forefront of something? I've always thought that about more power to the people. We're like, why aren't more wealthy people opening up banks and helping the communities out?
Yeah.
Right. Since banking seems to be the most profitable thing on planet Earth, why wouldn't more people with money be opening up banks, helping? And you get into certain communities, because the banks have gotten so big too. You can pinpoint, because I think it's the broad stroke. I think of like even like back when the pandemic, where I'm like, you can't paint a broad stroke for everything, because every community is different.
It is,
right, and you need the right. And it's like having the right product for the right community. I used to live in the mountains. Everybody drove a Subaru. Well, why? Because you needed four-wheel drive in the wintertime, because you're going up and down hills. That's the right product for the community.
It is.
Right? So, and it's no different if we're talking about financial products or anything like that. And because I want to get to what you're doing now, but what did you do anything differently with that credit that you'd say, oh, wow, why aren't more banks doing this? Or was there anything when you come back, or like the research you did, what was it? What brought you to the thing that you got, like the product that you presented? And then was there any part of like, why isn't this a more available thing?
Sure. I think my epiphany happened actually when I was at Citigroup. And I sat in a room with people who were making decisions about collection strategies. Yeah. And they were talking about how to approach certain customers that had a variety of different problems, and trying to figure out what is the right payment plan to put them on in order to get them back into, kind of being able to use their card again and things of that nature. And most of what they were talking about was very punitive, right? How much can we charge them as a result of going delinquent?
Yeah.
How many times can we, charge them this fee and not stress them to the point where they charge off, and then we never get anything from them? And then even after charge off, how do we pursue them in a way that allows us to recover the most amount of money back as we possibly can, right? Exactly. Yeah, so it was a very punitive conversation, right? And it was all about penalizing and how we can actually get to that point of having them to pay us as much as they possibly could. And there was never a point in which they looked at the opportunity to help repair the relationship with that customer, or even to provide access to that to capital or to credit for that customer in a way that taught them how to actually use it and give them information that says, this is how I would prefer that you use this money, right? I'd like for you to pay it back this way. If you really don't have the means to do it that way, then let's talk about that. Let's change your credit limit. Let's talk about how you earn better APR and things of that nature, right? And along the way, I also learned through, after working for Mr. Johnson at RLJ Financial, and then at a current fintech company that I work with at Elevate, a lot of more research is showing that it's not just one thing that makes people go into that kind of spins people off into bad credit. It's usually a series of different things. It could be divorce. It can be school. It can be flat tires. It could be a number of different things. And it's never usually one thing. In fact, the average middle American who has a median income usually has about 2 to 3 income swings per year. And we don't incorporate that in most of our, kind of credit programs, right? And I started looking at the reasons why people get into these issues and what kind of exacerbates those issues. And the more and more you start to dig into kind of the reasons why, it's not really about the reasons why, but it's more about what do they fear the most that is driving them to make the decisions that they are today. And that fear, by and large, is hunger.
Really?
Hunger. Hunger is at the core of every fear that every parent and every couple has, that they will do anything and everything they can to stop themselves from going hungry, right? And it became one of those issues that was just at the root. It was kind of a root problem that permeated into a lot of other things. You think about the last time that you were really hungry and how emotional you got.
I think they call the term is called hangry.
Exactly, right? And that emotion that you get when you're hungry causes you to make different decisions.
100%. Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
And that
That's a good
same
point.
stimulus that happens when you're hungry also happens when you fear not having money.
Yeah.
You make different decisions when you feel like your resources might be running low, right? Yeah. You make different decisions about where you're going to go in your car when your gas starts to get a little bit low, right?
Yeah.
So it's not hunger just for food, but it's the concept of hunger and the way that humans behave as a result of feeling like that loss is coming, right? Yeah. But I also knew that if hunger was kind of at the root of that, then I needed to better understand kind of the psychology of how to better change that, right? Like what can you do? I grew up on a farm in North Carolina.
That's right. We talked about this.
Right.
Yeah. We're both farm folks.
Yeah. I grew up on a farm in North Carolina, and I didn't know until I got to college that I was categorized as poor. My mom made $129 a week when I was a kid, all the way up until I was in the 8th grade. And I remember that number because it was very consistent on her paychecks, and she used to share it with us. She was very open about how much money we had because we budgeted everything, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But I also grew up on a farm, and we never suffered for hunger,
Boom.
right?
Yep.
And in fact, my grandfather was a truck driver for a guy who was a commercial farmer. He used to get seeds from this guy every single year because there were seed companies that were sending him stuff all the time. He only grew 4 crops. He wasn't going to use all these seeds, so he would just give them to my grandfather. And my grandfather would, garden about 3 or 4 acres of land, and then he would open up. Yeah, exactly. That's how much seed we had,
Whoa,
right? And
that's a lot.
It is. It was huge. We had corn. We had every vegetable that you can think of. We had it. Even stuff that doesn't normally grow in North Carolina. Yeah. We had it, and we had people from our church, people from our neighborhood, family members, friends, anybody and everybody. My grandfather would say, just come through there, and whatever you can pick, you can get it, because it was way too much stuff for us to use, right?
Yeah.
Even though we had a pretty large family, it still was just way too much. So as a kid, I'm sitting in my front yard watching my friends drive up and go back into our garden getting food. And so I'm thinking, like, I'm the man, right?
Yeah,
like, I'm doing really well. Exactly. And I get to college, and I started learning all this terminology, this economic terminology, and looking back at my situation, and all this vocabulary was telling me that I'm poor, and I'm impoverished, right? And I remember my grandfather telling me that poor is a mentality. It's not a state of being itself. It's just a mentality. And if you think you're poor, and if you act like you're poor, and you work like you're poor, you're going to be poor. Right? Exactly. Yeah. And I never grew up really thinking that way, right? I always felt like we were capable of doing anything and everything that we wanted to do. My mom, when I first went to college, my first design class, my mom built that house that I designed. She got it like certified by an architect, and she actually built it. But here's the thing, like, all of my family members helped her build it. Like, my dad was the electrician on it. My uncles were plumbers. Like, the whole family kind of participated in all of that, right?
That's fantastic.
So very self-reliant, and I remember growing up that way. So hunger to me was never really like a problem, but what I started to realize when I was in college, and even when I started working in my career, that there were a lot of people that suffered from hunger, kind of quietly, and they made bad decisions as a result of that, right? So I went to this event, and my current partner now, Nick Marino, who really was kind of the genesis, or kind of the mastermind behind all of this, he hosted an event at a local restaurant, and he basically gave some information about what hunger looks like in the city, in the state, and also across the U.S. He talked about ways that people could impact hunger. He talked about how it impacts other people that are hungry, right? And what it really starts to look like in your community when you're walking around. Kids that have free lunch, their parents may be suffering from it, right? Even reduced lunch, for that matter. Very easy example to kind of see. So in a very non-stalkerish way, I followed him to the homeless recovery center that he was going to take all of these proceeds. We had a great event, and we probably had close to 2,000 meals that we were going to be donating to a local homeless recovery center.
That's up in NC, not here.
This was in Texas, in Dallas, Texas.
Texas. That's right. You did a lot. You guys do a lot of work out there.
Yes, that's really where all of this stuff.
You guys had like some Guinness Book of World Records stuff.
We sure do. That's exactly right.
We'll get into that in a sec. But you say so. You go there.
So I follow him back to this homeless recovery center. I go inside, and I talk to the guy who was the benefactor of all these meals, and he ran it was the Soup Mobile was the name of the place. Great guy. He talked a lot about my partner Nick, how great he was, how consistent they were bringing resources in and all this. And I was like, well, this is great. I was like, I believe in them now. This is a great recommendation, right? I'm going to go back to another event because it was so fun. Like, it was just a big community, lots of music. They were, serving mimosas and everything that day. We were just having a really great time. So I said, but do you mind if I just stick around and hand out some of these meals that I made today? I helped make. And he was like, oh, absolutely. We love volunteers like that. So one of the people that I actually met that day is the one person that really kind of was the catalyst for really me saying, like, this is what I'm going to devote my life to. It was a 16-year-old kid who walked in, and he was very well dressed, khaki pants, polo shirt, nice haircut, and really young, and very mature when he walked in. Like he knew the process. He understood what he needed to do. And these homeless recovery centers are great. Like they don't ask you any questions. You and I could walk in there today. They'll give us a meal.
Yeah.
No questions asked. Because they want everyone to feel like they have dignity, right?
Exactly.
They're fantastic organizations when they try to help feed people. This kid sat down and I sat next to him and it was just like chatting, like, you know, starting general conversation with him. And we started talking about some of his favorite subjects in school. And he told me his parents work. He was not homeless. You know, he just needed a meal. And I asked him about his favorite subjects in school. He said that math was his favorite subject. Loved math. He said he used to do like math quizzes for himself on his phone. He would do little things after school and all this stuff. And so he loved math. And I was like, that's great. I was like, do you think you'll go to college for that? And he said, no, I'm not doing so well in school. I don't know if I'm going to make it. And I was like, well, why not? He said, well, because every year I have to fail my math course in order to go to summer school. Because if I don't go to summer school,
You can't get meals.
I don't eat. Either I don't eat or my parents don't eat.
Oh.
And he said, I'm not the first kid to do it. I'm not going to be the last kid to do it because we all kind of suffer from it every once in a while. And that was the moment that really kind of sparked me to say, like, I'm going to dig deep into this and start, you know, really trying to make a change.
Man, that's wild.
Yeah.
Wait, how long ago was that?
That was over almost 8 years ago. Actually, 10 years ago.
10 years ago. And then from there, so he's now your partner.
Yes.
Who brought you there, and you had that moment with
Yep.
this. You still
So we started. We really ramped up on Tango Charities. We now host events in about 23 different cities around the U.S. We've done events in Zimbabwe. We've done events in Greece, in Singapore, lots of different places. Different logistics for making that happen, but we've been able to feed over 6 million people through the Feed the City events that we host. And to me, the bigger success for me is the fact that we've been able to have 90,000 plus volunteers that have come in, and we've been able to teach each one of those people about what hunger really looks like. And I tell that story about that 16-year-old kid every time that I host one of these events, because I want people to understand that kid wasn't a homeless person that was on the side of the road.
Well-dressed
young man who was doing well in school or had the ability to do well in school. But he said to me, I know that by failing this class and not doing so well, that my teachers look at me in a very different way. I know that I'm not going to get recommendations to go to the best schools. So I'm probably not going to get the best career placement down the road. And so I'm probably not optimizing what I could make with my type of skill set. And there's loads of people out there that are in that exact same situation.
I've heard crazy numbers before, like 1 out of 4 in the richest society that the world has ever known. It sits somewhere around 25%. Am I correct on that?
It depends on the state. In general, the U.S. is at 1 in 6.
1 in 6. Okay.
Right.
So yeah. Okay.
The state of Florida and the state of
15%.
Texas are both roughly around 1 in 5. If you look at the statistics at the children level, it's 1 in 4.
Yeah, and that's the plus too with children. It's like I got into a supplement called Moringa, and that was like one of the first. That was actually the thing I was going to do at first, but what I learned was you know, like if you deprive a child of nutrition in those vital years and stuff too, it's what can really take place is, you know, it affects their it destroys their life because
it does.
It shoots down their intellect, right? Like their IQ shoots
Absolutely.
down. A lot of bad things happen, and then their whole life is basically shot. And
they make bad choices. I mean, if you think about a lot of hip hop records, a lot of rock records, when they talk about struggle, they talk about hunger.
Yeah.
They always even equate that sometimes to their, you know, reason to fight back. And their reason to try to achieve is I'm hungry for it.
Yeah, it's like it's hunger across the board in every
is.
Like you got to be hungry for it. That was one of the guys I watch for where his name is C.T. Fletcher's big work guy. He's like, I'm hungry for this ass.
Yes.
You know, I was like that kind of, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
It's like, yeah. Well, two things. First of all, like if you have any advice, this is like HemFit podcast. And the reason I brought Dion on is just like when we talk about mental health and stuff is like, I think that servitude is the quickest way to having a fulfilling life. And
Absolutely.
and I don't, and especially I find so many people in the finance industry that start in finance and they find their way into servitude. It's amazing because I think we all kind of get into that thing of wealth. And when you get down to like what wealth like truly means, you know what I mean? It's just like, hey, I think of, you know, I mean, you obviously touch a lot of lives. I mean, hopefully through my product, I mean, I get to like, you know, help a lot of people out and stuff. And like, you're way more hands-on. What you do is way more admirable. But the process from, because I think, what year were you born?
1974.
Oh, you're older than me. Okay, cool. I thought you were a bit younger than me. But like, you know, like that process from the early 20s, because you're trying to figure it out for yourself.
Yeah.
And then you hit a spot in a point where, like a point in life, you're like, oh man, no, it's the opposite of that. It's about the opposite. It's always about servitude. What would be like what would you tell people that are like looking, because I think this is such a big thing, hunger, especially in a society like this. What's the first step they can take to get involved? And then secondly, how does anybody get in touch with you? If anybody wants to contact you, or if there's anything that you can point people to?
Sure. So there's usually two things that stop people from volunteering or serving. And that is one, just a lack of awareness around how they can make an impact. And then two, it is most people think that they have to donate money. And that contribution sometimes scares them, and scares them to even go ask for money from their company sometimes, right? The reality is that a lot of the impact that Tango Charities has made and what I've made and all of the volunteers and hosts have made is really just their presence. I mean, the reality is that if you just show up, it makes a difference in the other people that are around and that see you. Like, we've hosted events several times in Frisco, Texas, where I used to host an event every Saturday. And in all of our events happen on Saturday mornings. But the Frisco, Texas event was, and still today, one of the largest events that we host. And I tell everybody that becomes a host for a new city, people don't come just because they care so much about making sandwiches and giving it away. They care because they actually like you and they connect with you. And they see that you care, and they see that it's a safe place for them to care. And they also see that in that group environment where there's more people that are making an effort through just doing a little bit of work for a couple of hours, and they, at the very end of it, they see that they've made 5,000, 10,000 meals, right? That they have a big impact. It feels pretty good. Now, I know I didn't make 12,000 meals, right? I probably made 20 or 30, right? But I contributed to the greater good here, right? And that becomes infectious. So I would say the first step is really to just, not allow yourself to not serve.
Yeah.
Like, don't sit and say that and give yourself excuses for why you can't, or sit and say, well, I just don't know where to go and how to do it. Go anywhere. The reality is you can go to your local school. You can go to a local homeless recovery center. You can go to a local church. There's lots of places you can go just to find what program is available for you to participate in. And you can participate in a very simple way just by sometimes showing up and sharing your experiences and mentoring and things of that nature. And the more you get involved and the more you start to find what that organization can do for folks that are local to you, you can help bring that community back, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you can see communities completely flip and change.
Absolutely.
Just off of just good Lakeland, Florida, where we are right now, is a prime example. All the churches are very involved here. And I think churches do a lot of commendable work. Even some churches that I deem to be progressive and not good, they still get out there and help some folks.
Yeah.
But how
I would just also just add to that: be consistent, right? Like, it's kind of like every other habit that we have.
Yeah, like
you
discipline.
Can't just do it one time and then go home and say, yes, I've done it.
Done.
Like, I'm done, right?
I'm retired.
Be consistent. And that's why I love the events that we host, because it's 3 to 4 hours on a Saturday morning. Yeah. And I used to tell people all the time, this was the best 3 to 4 hours of my week. And I can't think of what I was doing on that Saturday morning between 7 and 12
that beats that.
That beats it.
Yeah.
There was nothing that I could have done. And I still had the rest of my day to kind of go and do some things, right? And I'm not saying everybody has to commit Saturday mornings at 3 to 4 hours, but what you can commit to is one of your days off for an hour or 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Just show up. And when you show up and you start showing up consistently, I think it really starts to make a difference in how you creatively think about how you can make a change, how you can have an impact. Now, I'm connected with a lot of charitable organizations because we have about 12 or so causes that we help bring businesses together with those charitable organizations to help them find ways that they can contribute to those causes. So I'm more than happy to share information and to share my approach to, different organizations that are in this area. There are some fantastic organizations that are here in the Florida area that are doing a lot of good work, and they literally could do more with just people showing up.
Yeah, more volunteers, yeah.
Yeah, it's great to get sponsorships and it's great to get money, but sometimes companies don't know that these organizations don't even exist because their employees never say, hey, I went and I volunteered for a couple hours at this one homeless recovery center, and they have programs for veterans, or they have programs for moms that have been displaced, that have gone through domestic dispute and domestic violence. There's just so many different programs that these organizations run, and they're very underutilized or very under-resourced only because people won't show up. And it has literally, it does have something to do with money, but the money is kind of secondary to the fact that people just won't show up. And if you show up and show up consistently, the money will follow you.
Yeah.
It'll absolutely follow you.
That's fantastic, man. Is there any, we can put a link below if there's anything that you want people
absolutely.
to give you some more information. It's just like we had it with John too, where we run out of time. we could have this. This should have been an hour and a half podcast, but my camera's overheated 38 minutes. I was telling
That's right.
I was like, it's between 30 and 38 minutes. He goes, Ian, that's a pretty specific time. That's right about the time my cameras explode. So that's why we do it like that. Anyways, John, thank you for being a part of this. We definitely would like to have you back just because we touched on a small part. You get applause the whole ride here. Thanks. Because there's so much more that you do. This is a good introduction anyways, and a couple of months we'll have you back, and because I want to talk about a lot of this. He set Guinness Book of World Records and everything else for making 50,000 sandwiches, and in one day
56,000 sandwiches in an hour.
This is what this guy's putting together and doing, man. It's an honor and a pleasure. It's good to know privilege. Just like you just need a one out of every 20 men that could live a life like you, and man, would society look different, brother. So thank you for what you do.
Everybody has the capacity to be great because everybody can serve.
Yeah.
And I'm not doing anything unique. I don't have a superpower. I just show up. That's all I do.
Well, dude, absolute pleasure having you on. I'm glad I know you. I get to call this man a friend. He's walking around here all day. we shoot the crap every once in a while. So thanks for watching the HemFit podcast, and we'll catch you on the next one.